So the first thing we need to know, before we even admit that we're alcoholic, there's something that we need to know first and foremost. What is alcoholism and what is addiction? Okay, because there's various theories about what they are. And to be honest with you guys, no one actually knows what alcoholism and addiction is. There's a million different ways you could use to describe it. It's almost like something like depression, where it's just, we know the symptoms of it, but it's actually too complex to just narrow down a specific cause. So lots of it, it's like, it could be the stop-go circuit being compromised, and that's probably true to some extent. And I do know that for me personally, I prefer the 12-step fellowship description of what an alcoholic and a drug addict is as opposed to the medical fraternity's substance misuse disorder, because the substance misuse disorder is pretty good and it's pretty broad and it encompasses a lot of our behaviors, but it leaves certain things out. It doesn't take all of our behaviors and all of our fucked up ways of thinking into account. So I prefer the 12-step model of addiction way better. And whenever I talk about addiction and alcoholism, I always referring to the 12-step model. Substance misuse disorder in the DSM is more accurately describing, it's like a mixture of depression and chemical dependence on a substance. Okay, and we know that you can be an addict and an alcoholic without actually being chemically dependent. Okay, there's a lot of people who hurt themselves and they get on perks or they get on oxys or something like that for a physical injury that they have, and those people will experience negative symptoms when they're getting off those medications. They'll go through detox. That doesn't make them an addict. And then there's also bona fide addicts and alcoholics that do drink their faces off, or they smoke a lot of down, or they fucking smash meth and stuff like that, but they don't have the money or the resources or the willpower to be able to get enough substances in them for enough time to even have to go through withdrawal. And I know in the earlier days of my addiction, I would go for 3 days and then pass out for 24 hours and go for 3 days, then pass out for 24 hours. And I had a good routine going where I wasn't too addicted yet, and I didn't have enough money, and I wasn't quite into theft yet, which I would have been later on. But I used for years without ever experiencing detox symptoms. I was never chemically dependent. So there's a lot more to addiction than chemical dependence and just being wired to drugs and alcohol, right? A lot more to it than that. I know you'll see some of those TED Talks, and the one guy, it's everything you know about addiction is wrong. And it's what? Who the fuck is this guy? Holy shit. And he goes on to describe the environmental influence of addiction. So he does those studies on rats where you can have the cocaine water, or you can have the heroin water, whatever kind of drug flavored water you can get. You put the rats in the cage and they drink it until they fucking die. They can't stop. Their seeking system is on full bore. The stimulus, which is the drugs that's supposed to stop their seeking system, does not work, and they just keep, it's like eating a bag of chips. You guys ever eat chips and you are chewing and you have your mouth, you have more chips, you hold them up to your mouth and you're still chewing the first bite, and you're just and you just keep going till the whole bag of chips is gone. It's almost like the rats would do that, and they would die every time. But then they found, if you get hamster wheels and little swingies and you get other rats in there, and you create rat park, they call it. There's just rat utopia with all their buddies and playthings. They don't go for the cocaine water. They don't go for the heroin water anymore. And maybe 1 out of 100 actually goes for the cocaine water. They do it first because they like it, but then they realize that real life, playing with their buddies, is actually better than just doing drugs. So he was making and it is a strong case. And again, there's many different avenues in which you can approach addiction. Some of them have more merit than others, but not one theory is completely true. Okay, it always leaves something out. A narrow approach like that will always leave something out. So this guy was well, that's evidence for addiction being very largely environmental, which there is a large environmental component. He also cites the studies in which the soldiers that went to Vietnam and they got addicted to heroin when they were over in Nam, or opium or whatever they were smoking over there at the time, they would come back, and 95 or 90% of the soldiers who were wired, chemically dependent to heroin, stopped smoking heroin as soon as they got back on home soil. So they're see, everything we know about addiction is wrong. It's environmental. You grab an addict, you put them in a good environment, boom, bada bing, bada boom. And that's obviously bullshit. It's a narrow approach. It's amateur hour. I don't know how it got a TED Talk. That's addiction 101. That's one of the first things you learn about addiction, is there's that component to addiction, but there's also many other components. Because what do they say? About 5 to 10% of the population in North America is addict. So what is the percentage of people that kept using drugs when they got back? In between 5 and 10%. So it doesn't actually really explain much. And I know there's early environmental influences that leads to one becoming an alcoholic in the future. So if I grew up in a shitty environment and I'm a young kid, even if I'm not a young kid, even if I've got a lot of sense about the world, if I grow up in that environment, I'm going to learn behaviors and beliefs about myself that later on will manifest themselves in addictive behaviors or mood altering behaviors, as they would say in like CBT. So there's that stuff going on, and obviously environment plays a huge role. But I'm going to go and describe what alcoholism is as far as like a 12-step fellowship model. And the reason why I keep going back to the 12-step fellowship model of recovery and addiction alcoholism, because I think it's just the best one. It takes into account a lot of different things going on at once. There is an element of CBT, there is an element of dialectic behavioral therapy within the 12-step model. There's all forms of psychotherapy, there's catharsis, there's abreaction. It encompasses a lot of things. And the thing about 12-step fellowships is most people don't know they're doing all that stuff when they go through a set of steps. They don't know that they're also like acting on some neuroplasticity, and they don't know that they're rewiring their brain. They don't know that they're doing this catharsis, which is one of the oldest forms of therapy possible. It goes, catharsis was kind of in ancient Greece, one of the earliest forms of therapy, and then it turned into the religious confession, and then later on it was, step 5. Okay, people don't know that they're doing all this stuff. Okay, and you don't even actually need to know that you're doing all this stuff. As long as you follow the instructions, follow the steps, all the stuff is going to work for you, whether you know you're doing it or not, right? So in 12-step fellowships, AA, NA, GA, SA, all the letters with the A on the end, anonymouses, they all say that spiritual malady is essentially the root cause of alcoholism and addiction. Now, there's a little bit of contention within the 12-step community whether spiritual malady is a product of these two things working together, or this was here first and then eventually these things sprung up from this. But it doesn't really matter. The point is, in 12-step fellowships, if you get rid of this, you're no longer suffering. You've recovered, okay, from a hopeless state of mind and body, okay? If you overcome this, you straighten out mentally and physically. So let's get into exactly what spirituality is, because if we're going to have any hope of overcoming alcoholism and addiction, again, we need to know what it is. Know thy enemy, right? Spiritual malady, nobody actually knows what it is, okay? It's intangible. There's no direct biological correlate. There's no certain set of neural networks up here that's responsible for the affect of spiritual malady. There's no spiritual malady genes. Maybe there actually is. I don't think it's ever been studied. But spiritual malady is almost the things that you can't quite put your finger on. Like if lots of mental illness is like a result of a chemical imbalance, right? Well, if you take the correct chemicals to restore that balance, you should be completely fine, right? And we all know, like, if people suffering from depression and stuff like that, meds make you feel different, but they don't really make the problem that much better. If anything, meds are a tool that you can utilize to get yourself up to a point where you can then go and make your life better in all these different areas, restore balance to your life so that you're balanced, and then you can not take the meds anymore. I mean, there's severe clinical depression and you're going to need the meds forever, and that's fine. That's a separate issue, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about spiritual malady being something that you can't measure. Okay, so the only confirmation of the spiritual malady that we have is the fact that we experience it. And if you guys are an addict or an alcoholic like me, you will know what it is. Okay, if nothing else, it's that feeling that there's a hole inside you and you can't fill it with anything. You're always looking for something, but you've never quite been able to find it. We can describe it in a bunch of different ways. Like, it could be like an extreme resistance to presence. If you guys are like an Eckhart Tolle fan and they're all about like being present in the moment, and the Buddhists are saying there's no suffering in the moment, and yada yada blah blah, and our experience is all everything we experience is a product of something that happened half of a second ago. So in the moment there's actually no suffering, and when you're present you're not in fear for the future, or you're not angry at something that's happened in the past. Presence is like kind of the holy grail when it comes to like Eckhart Tolle. He wrote The Power of Now, right? Tomorrow never comes. It's always today. All you guys ever have is the present moment. That last sentence I just described is gone with the wind. I'm never getting that back. It's not real anymore, and neither is the future. All we ever have is right now. So you could describe spiritual malady as an extreme resistance to presence. An extreme resistance where, we're trying to be in the moment and we're trying to feel okay and we're trying to have a good time and we're trying to be happy, but always these ghosts from the past or these specters of the future are haunting us. Things that we've done, okay, what people think of us. How I might not be successful in the future, and I'll think about that and it'll take me out of the present moment. I don't know about you guys, I don't need any stimulus other than my own fucking brain to feel absolutely crazy. I don't need external stimulus. Nothing even needs to happen to me for me to feel like shit. I can just be sitting in my fucking apartment, it's room temperature, I've got money in the bank, okay? I don't have to work, my girlfriend's happy with me, my parents are happy with me, my friends are happy with me, everything's going fine. And I'll just be sitting there and I'll be like, the future, fuck expensive to live, fuck it's expensive to live in Vancouver. Like fuck ICBC really fucking sucks. Man, I really hate BC Hydro, they charging me up the ass. Fuck these new smart meters they're trying to install and I just start thinking, and all that's really going on is I'm thinking. And my thinking is so negatively orientated and it's so fearful that I don't need anything other than my own thinking to completely put me in the wrong frame of mind. Because what is an emotion, right? It's a physiological response to my thoughts. And if my thoughts are all shitty, you can bet that you're gonna feel shitty. So spiritual malady, an extreme resistance to presence, okay? Lots of time, when I was a kid, people would have to do things to me to make me unhappy, okay? Something would need to happen in order for me to be unhappy. Now it's the other way around. I'm in a state of unhappiness most of the time. I don't feel good, restless, irritable, discontent. Something's not right. I'm not quite content. I'm not quite happy. Somebody has to do something for me or to me to make me happy. Or I have to seek out some kind of mood altering stimuli like fucking sex, money, drugs, getting a sick upper body pump at the gym, whatever it may be. I constantly need something. Spiritual malady, the feeling that something is not okay, life is not okay, I'm not content, is my baseline. That's my baseline. And I continually will get off center or out of presence. And then what happens? I need to bang some chick. Then I need to get a bunch of money. Then I need someone to give me a bunch of compliments. Then I need to get a sick upper body pump. And then these things are no longer working. Now I have a sick upper body pump, I got a hot girlfriend, I got a bunch of money, doesn't take me all the way to center anymore. So what do I need to do now? I need to increase the intensity of the stimuli, and heroin's really good for that. So eventually I'm just gonna need to switch up to things. And when I was young, I would just drink and smoke weed. And then all of a sudden, I was partying for a bit. That got old fast. With spiritual malady, the novelty of whatever new kind of thing we're into wears off really fast. And the older we get, the faster these things start to wear off. Like a new group of friends that are super cool, that have all these sweet toys and they're drinking and they introduce you to ketamine and you've never done and it's a new group of friends, new drug, you're like, holy fuck, that can keep you going for 6 months. But when you're 25 years old, it's 1 hour. And then you're like, what next? I hop from party to party, trying to find an overwhelming amount of stimuli that will bring me here. And again, once it stops working, which it obviously will stop working, we just keep going off to the side and we can't get back. So we need to do more heroin, right? More of whatever works, but nothing will actually do it. The speed in which we start going offside increases and we can't get back. And then at some point we have a breakdown. And then we go, holy shit, everything's so shitty, and we either go to detox or we go to treatment or we have some kind of behavioral intervention from our families and stuff like that. And then we go, oh shit, I better fucking get my shit together and fly right. And we do it for a little while, but that spiritual malady, that persistent feeling that things aren't okay, doesn't go anywhere, and it just follows us around. So that's why those geographical changes don't work, right? That's why even environment doesn't work. Okay, I could be so rich and famous that everybody loves me and I have an infinite amount of money. It's not going to do anything. If my spiritual malady is still present, I'm going to get upset over anything. I'll always be offside. Okay, and we know a lot of famous musicians and a lot of famous actors and a lot of people who have a lot of power, influence, love, respect, money, all these fancy toys that succumb to this illness because they just can't anymore. It doesn't matter. Spiritual malady doesn't give a fuck about what you have. It actually doesn't give a fuck about anything going on in the external world. So Spiritual malady could be an extreme resistance to presence. That's what it could be. Okay? It could also be something like this. Okay? Here's a bit of a cool concept, is that we don't live in the same versions of reality. Okay? The same person that is interpreting the information up here and narrating my life is a different person than who's narrating your guys' life. I see certain things and I attach meaning to them, and they mean different things to me. That's why we like different music. That's why we like different movies. That's why certain people we really like and certain people we don't really like, based on a whole host of factors. So essentially, my brain is a learning computer. It takes in information through my 5 senses, it learns lessons, and then it projects those lessons out into the outside world, and it creates a model of reality that is more or less accurately representing actual reality itself. So I live in my own special Joey version of reality. Now, if my version of reality doesn't match actual reality closely enough, I'm going to experience resistance. If I've learned this lesson based on shitty parenting, or maybe I went to a school and all my friends were idiots, and I think that walking up to people and, okay, here's one. When I was in school, we had this Korean exchange student, Joe. And when he first got there, he's a really extroverted guy, like really likes people. Like everyone really liked him a lot. And I guess he doesn't have I don't know what kind of shit he learned when he was growing up, but he came up and he slapped me. And he went, "Just kidding." And he was laughing, like, "Hi, just kidding." And I was just like, no, not just joking. You can't slap me. And he was laughing and laughing. And I was really close to punching him in the back of the head as he walked away. And the teacher was looking at me and the guys were looking at me and they were like, kind of like, what is he going to do? And I was just kind of like, but the point is that Joe had no idea he was doing anything wrong. Like he fully thought like, it's a joke. Like slapping someone in the face is not a joke. And between, like especially in this culture, in this North American culture, that's a call to arms, if you will. Like that's like a challenge. And amongst me and my friends, if we even went like this to each other's face, that was all it would take. But I could tell there was something going on here where he had no idea, and I was like, what do I do? And I didn't know what to do. So that's one small example. If you're wrong, if you've modeled reality wrong for yourself, you're going to experience resistance from other people. You know, even really, and these problems are going to manifest themselves in the fucking weirdest ways that you will never ever suspect. There's billions and billions and billions of different ways that these problems can manifest. Like it could be like, oh fuck, whatever, man, I got a Honda. You don't even fucking need to do anything. These things will go forever. And it's got like, like 280 Ks on it. It's like from 1992, and you're like fucking 1,000 K past your oil change. Whatever, man, it's a Honda. Boom, breaks down in the middle of fucking a busy street, which is exactly what happened to me. And I'm like, fuck, I thought it was a Honda. I thought, ooh, Honda's this and Honda's that. You know what I mean? So just because Hondas last a long time doesn't mean you don't have to maintain them in any way. You need to do the proper maintenance. So again, someone slapping you, you slapping someone in the face and them getting mad at you, or your car just breaking down suddenly. All these negative consequences that we experience, usually, not always, because there is a random element to being alive, but mostly there's a long chain of events that led up to that happening in the first place. And if my model of reality is not correct, I'm going to be ever so subtly off the beam, and I'm going to be headed in the wrong direction. And the farther I get in the wrong direction, the more resistance I'm going to experience. And here's the thing about addicts. One of the differentiating factors between an addict and a normal person. Normal people that don't suffer from the spiritual malady have this intuitive sense that something is wrong and they need to correct their course. For me, personally, and for lots of my friends, and in my experience in the field of addiction, is that we double down. Whatever is not working, we feel it's because we're not doing it hard enough. So we just run faster and faster as time goes on in the wrong direction. These things start popping up, we start to feel like, hey, maybe, there's nothing wrong with me. That guy's a dick. That person's an asshole. My boss is a piece of shit. It's BC Hydro's fault that I never paid my bill. I don't pay my bill, they shut off my gas. Somehow it's their fault because they're being unfair, and I just keep on and I start to pathologize my fucking bullshit. So my super skewed wrong version of the world becomes a pathology, an ideology that I'm possessed by. I don't call it into question. I don't assume I'm wrong. I just trudge the road and try and make things better, and it only gets worse, and I have no idea why the fuck. And every once in a while, I'll just be by myself and I'll just break down and I'll be like, why is everything so fucking hard? And I never think that it's a result of me being wrong about everything I think I know. My brain will never say, hey, I'm wrong. Don't listen to me. The brain doesn't even understand that there's something called spirit or your soul or God or what consciousness. It will never say that. It'll just say, fuck, you need to do whatever I'm telling you even more. So that's spiritual malady, okay? So if we suffer from spiritual malady, what do? Okay? Well, we got to do something. So that persistent feeling that everything's all fucked up all the time, we got to do something about it, right? So what do? We compensate for it. Well, if I'm going to feel like shit all the time and doing something makes me feel good, I always have to be doing something. So this is when addiction is starting to be created. Now I'll just always be high because I need this. Insanity of the mind is a compensation for the spiritual malady. If I'm always feeling like shit, here's what goes on. My brain is a super learning computer and it's always figuring shit out. So my brain always, hey, I know what to do. And it's complete, and it only functions in a logical, immediate way. And it doesn't have, maybe that's an addict specific thing or a mental illness specific thing, but it doesn't have a lot of foresight. It'll tell me what to do to get out of this negative emotion right now because it wants to protect itself from psychological pain because it's really destructive. You know, one of the leading causes of death in North America is actually heart disease, and heart disease is there's a really large stress component to heart disease. People get heart disease because they're fucking stressed a lot. So our brain is going to try and do whatever it can to immediately protect us from psychological damage because we take these threats too seriously. And if these little threats, people looking at us funny, our car breaking down, these little things that go on in our life, we take them to heart. Like they're threatening our survival instinct here. They have way too much power over us. There's way too much of an emotional reaction in response to these events. So I'm reacting to these negative situations far too severely, and these reactions are going to demand an equally severe response. So like if someone just looking at me funny has the power to like fucking make my emotionality like go way up, I'm going to need to use a lot of heroin about it just because somebody looked at me. What if I'm misperceiving the way he's looking at me in the first place? Maybe he thinks I'm cute. Maybe he likes my shoes. Maybe he's like, hey, that guy is cool. I don't think like that guy. I go, what the fuck is that guy looking at? Fuck him. I'm going to smoke so much heroin tonight. It's fucking insane. So the insanity, is this constant search to get out of spiritual malady by any means necessary. My brain will never say, you know what, all these little things that I'm telling you to do to make you feel better, like get a girlfriend, get some heroin, get some money, do this. It'll never say that those things are wrong, and what you need to do is look outside yourself for a power greater than yourself, connect to your own soul, your inner spirit, your spirit animal, your inner child, and recreate and revolutionize the way that you perceive the world. My brain doesn't say that to me. My brain just goes, try this, try this, try this, try this, and I'm trying them all. Fucking eat a bunch of taquitos from 7-Eleven. Like anything. And I don't have the power really to question what my brain is saying. My conditioning will say things and I'll just do it. And that's another way you could describe spiritual malady, an over-identification with intellect. So however your brain has been conditioned, it becomes who you are and it drives every little piece about you. So this insanity split up into three. Okay, there's probably hundreds of symptoms of this insanity and there's hundreds of symptoms of alcoholism. We don't exactly know the difference between what is your alcoholism and addiction and what is you being an asshole. Okay, we exhibit a lot of asshole behaviors and we can't just blame them all on the fact that we're a drug addict. I'm in recovery. You know what I mean? So the insanity, if nothing else, if we want to distill it into like one thing that it definitely is, it's the fact that we absolutely cannot stop ourselves from using again or drinking again. We just keep going back over and over again to the very thing that's killing us. And somehow every time we're fucking, not every time, but most of the time I was excited about it. I know it's killing me. It's been 10 years. I'm still smoking heroin. Heroin has now transitioned into fentanyl. Everyone's overdosing. I'm purposely buying fentanyl when I actually was able, back in the day, like 2014, 2015, you actually had a little bit of a choice. You could buy heroin or you could buy fentanyl. I was purposely buying fentanyl because it was cheaper and there was more of it. So that was horrible. I knew my life would be better if I stopped. I knew it was the source of a lot of my problems. I knew that people were mad at me, and I knew I wasn't moving forward in my life, and I wasn't successful, and I was gonna die a lonely old streetwalker if I didn't stop doing it, yet I would do it anyways. And when I was going to get it, nothing but happiness, nothing but excitement, the call to adventure. This is gonna be awesome. It's fucked up. That's why the insanity is so weird. So there's a couple things going on that make up the insanity, which is the second symptom of addiction or alcoholism. Delusion, that's one of the main ones. So there's a couple delusions that most of us suffer from. How many people here have said, I'm only hurting myself? Yeah, a lot of us. So that's obviously bullshit, right? If you guys have any family, any friends at all, if you have a job at all, if you have anyone that relies on you for anything, even if you don't, I'm not just hurting myself when I'm doing B&Es, am I? What about when I'm wandering the streets at night, fucking like Gollum, Smeagol from Lord of the Rings, breaking into people's cars to try and get money to score? Like, obviously, what about my mother? Do you know that at one point I actually told my mother, all the conflict that's going on between us is your fault. She was absolutely shocked by this. She's like, but explain what you mean by that. Well, you're responsible for your own feelings, so you're the one who cares so much. So if you didn't care about every single little thing I did, then there wouldn't be a problem between us. And I meant that with every fiber of my being. It was like a gotcha moment. I actually felt like I had won something. Yeah, I finally outsmarted mom. And she's like, what the fuck are you talking about? She's like, you're my son, you idiot. And I was just like, oh, she's right. You know what I mean? Highly delusional. Did anyone think that they were fine a lot of the time? Hey, how are you? I'm great. Are you? Yeah, I'm fine. I've got fucking marks all over my face. I'm 40 pounds underweight. I don't have any friends anymore. I'm fucking just barely scraping by with my bills and stuff like that. I'm looking like shit. I'm feeling like shit. Hey, Joey, how are you? I'm great. They're like, okay, sure. I actually thought I was great. Man, I really got the world by the balls right now, I used to say. And I actually thought I had it all going on. I remember one day it was like 4 a.m, me and my brother in Whistler. It was like we were both on ecstasy and we were sitting in our fucking shitty apartment. I was like, all the dishes were dirty and stuff like that. And I remember being like, you know what? Like, we're so much better than everybody else. And he like looked at me, he's like, what? I'm like, no, I know what you're gonna say. It's 4 a.m, our apartment's messy, we're on drugs. And this is like every night for us. But we are better than other people. And he was just like this. No, we're not, Joey. And I'm like, no, like I know that we're all fucked, but like the way that we think we're smarter than everybody, our opinions are better than other people's opinions. Like it was like kind of like the thing, if people like us ran the country would be a better place type thing. Like we think that we're the best. Our opinions the music that we like is the best music. The movies that we like are the best movies. The people that we like are the best people. Our judgment is impeccable. What we think of shit is actually what it is. Like our thoughts are the word of God. And he was just like, he started getting mad at me. And he was really, really, really trying to convince me that we weren't very special at all. And we were actually worse than the average person, which was true. And I was not hearing any of it. I couldn't even believe the things that he was saying. And the same thing with him. He was like, are you fucking kidding me? It's 4 a.m, our apartment's disgusting. You're fucking skinny as fuck. We don't have any money. Like, how are we better than everybody? And I'm just like, oh, Zach, don't be silly. Like, so delusional. Was anybody like this? Did anybody thought they were just killing it? One time my dad confronted me. He's like, Joey, what are you doing? And I knew what he meant. Like, it was like a life question. It was like a dad question. I was like, you know what, Dad? I was like, life is a game. And I'm just playing the game. And I'm good at it. And like, again, the exact same thing as my brother. He's like, no, you're not. You're 40 pounds underweight. You've got marks all over your face. You look like shit. You feel like shit. You're sad all the time. Where's all your friends at? And it just hit me right in the gut. I was like, oh, fuck my feelings. But he was right. But I've just been delusional. This is the main delusion. I think the main delusion that we suffer from is the one where we think we can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if we only manage well. All I have to do is manage my external situation well. Okay? I just have to have the right girl in my life. I have to live in the right apartment. I have to have the right type of job. I need the right amount of money in my bank account. I need people to think of me in a certain way. I need this reputation. I need these clothes. And as soon as I'm able to make this all happen, put this puzzle together, I'm going to be happy. That's the main delusion that we suffer from. That's the axiom in which all of our other actions are based off. If I manage my external situation, I'm going to be happy. And of course we'd think that. Of course we'd believe that. Of course we'd spend our whole lives in a futile effort to try and make things go our way because we need it to be happy. And why that's of course is because that's what our brain says. Our brain always knows what we need to be happy. It has no problem feeding us this faulty information, and we don't even know how to question it. Most people don't even know that we can question it. You guys can question your own brains. You are not your brain. Your brain is a body part. It's a tool that you, whoever you are, whatever I am, is supposed to be able to command to get what it wants out of life. But what's going on right now is it's completely the other way around, and my brain is now, instead of being my servant, it's my master. And it's continually running me into the ground over and over and over again. So that's the thought that we can be happy, truly happy and content, finally, if we only make everything outside of us go exactly the way we want, is the main delusion that we suffer from. So now the obsessions. There's mainly 3 that we suffer from. The first one, in one of the some 12-step literature, they describe it like this. There's the obsession that somehow, someday, he will beat the game. Okay? And this is referring to us being our own solution. Has anyone thought that one day I'm just going to grow out of it? Yeah. One day I'm just going to grow out of it. One day I'm just going to mature. One day I'm just going to finally decide that enough's enough and I'll just stop. Everybody hopefully awaits the day when the sufferer will rouse himself from his lethargy and assert his power of will. One day, enough will be enough. And we even got fucking one simps in meetings, people with only the first symptom who don't have this symptom, not even real alcoholics, and they'll get up there at the podium in these 12-step fellowship meetings and they'll say, as soon as you guys actually make up your mind that you want to stop, you can stop. And like, if you guys are a real addict, alcoholic like me, you know that's fucking bullshit. Because there's a lot of times where I've desperately wanted to stop to absolutely no avail. Nothing I could do to stop that wave from fucking crashing over me, and I'm off to the races. I have mental blank spots as well. I don't even need to want to get loaded, or I don't even need to think about getting loaded in order to get loaded. I'm doing something. I'm acting in such a way where I think I'm literally going and just doing a regular day. I'm just acting normally, living a regular life, being normal. And then all of a sudden, heroin finds me. Do drugs find you guys? Oh, yeah. Does alcohol just find you guys? That's what we think, but everything in us just exudes that. We do it. If anyone could see me that day from above, like that show with Jim Carrey where he's like in that TV show, if there was cameras on me, every single person would be like, he's going to get loaded right now. I'm the only one who doesn't think he's going to get loaded. So you have those people saying when you really want to stop, you are able to stop. Okay? That's the first obsession. One day I'm just going to grow out of it. I don't need the steps. I don't need spirituality. I don't need a power greater than myself. I don't need anything. I just need my own fucking willpower. And when that right girl comes into my life, or that right job opportunity arises, or that, you know, I finally get enough money to afford a boat or whatever, some ridiculously bullshit thing happening is going to get me out of this. And again, that's one of the ones that we'll spend our whole lives telling, that's true, that's true. Our brain loves that one. Because why? Because we don't have to go over its head. Our brain does not like when we go over its head. I don't conceptualize the brain as an evil creature that wants to keep us down, but I conceptualize it as a computer who has no idea there's anything outside the computer. My computer at home, it doesn't know that there's humans. It doesn't know that there's dogs, cats, Africa, a whole life out there, a whole world out there. It just does what it does. Same with my brain. It just does what it does. Okay? And it always tries to fight for control. It tries to always compute everything. Use logic to discount everything else other than logic itself. So the second obsession, and I'm sure you guys are the most familiar with this one, is that somehow we will be able to control and enjoy our liquor or drug consumption. Anybody? I'm just going to buy one Q, okay? I'm going to smoke it over a period of 3 days, and then I'm going to go to sleep, and then I'll buy another Q. And every 3 days, I'll buy a Q. $40 every 3 days, I can just maintain that. And I actually try, and I know That's paradoxical in that and of itself, because there's no such thing as regular, normal heroin consumption. That's not something people do. If we're talking about weed, if we're talking about booze, you know, more socially acceptable, less hard drug, you can get into, drinking like a normal person, but normal people just don't use heroin. But that doesn't seem to bother me, because I don't think heroin is as bad. I didn't think heroin was as bad as people said it. You know what I mean? And I actually continually thought that for like 6 years. So I was like, actually, no, wait. It is as bad as they say. There's a long chain of life events and spiritual malady and mental illness and experimenting with other drugs that lead you up to that point. Okay? I can tell you the first time I did heroin and it worked, I was like, this is the best thing I've ever done with my life. But I was an addict before that. The substance actually doesn't really seem to matter. It's me. The substance is inert. It's just sitting there. There's no meaning. It doesn't mean anything. It's not trying to do anything. It's just there. It's me who acts upon the substance that creates addiction. So, I mean, if I'm an addict, then I can be perceived to have been addicted as soon as I did it. But it didn't create that monster. That monster pre-existed me using the drugs. So the amount of effort we spend on the day-to-day trying to prove to ourselves and to others, or trying to figure out how we can control and enjoy, is astonishing. Like the persistence of this illusion, we pursue it to the gates of permanent insanity, schizophrenia, death, overdose, suicide. And here's the thing. It makes perfect sense that we do that. Why? Because drugs and alcohol are the only thing that can temporarily mask this. The only thing. A lemon juice cleanse isn't going to cut it. Getting a sick upper body pump at the gym isn't going to cut it. Getting a high-paying job isn't going to cut it. Drugs, alcohol, instantly make this go away. And I've experienced this my whole life. They don't work for that long. It doesn't work for that long, obviously. And the older you get and the longer you've been an addict, the less time you spend in that blissful state, until eventually it's like you need to constantly be smoking something. Like constantly. Like I'm only happy if I have like enough so I can like continually smoke for hours. You know what I mean? And that becomes increasingly harder to do as I become more and more broke. And then you start not even be able to go into stores. You know what I mean? Because I used to steal my food so I didn't have to spend my money on food. But when you're so shitty that as soon as you go into the store that people know that you're going to steal something, then you're really fucked. Then you withdraw from everything, and you just like, you don't go in the daytime anymore. You become a zombie, essentially. The next stop is the downtown east side or Wally or where the fuck you're from, right? So control and enjoy. The last obsession is kind of like a hidden obsession. It'd be a obsession that like nobody knows. Like nobody knows. And there's a bunch of different degrees in severity of this obsession. Like I knew that people knew something, but I didn't know exactly what. And I mean, most people didn't know exactly what I was doing. Like, yeah, he's smoking heroin all the time. But most people knew that I was definitely not the person that I portrayed myself to be to the outside world. Like, I portrayed myself to be like super happy, super confident, had their shit together, really had the world by the balls. I can do anything I want. Like, I'm super self-assured and I'm confident I'm going to attack the world and make it my bitch and fucking bring in tons of money. And so that's the kind of person who I acted like. And people were like, and some people would believe me, but only if they didn't know me very well. As soon as you started spending any amount of time around me, they were like, this guy's he's not congruent. What he says does not match what he does at all. He doesn't do what he says, and he doesn't say what he does. So essentially, the inconsistencies between my stage character, as we call them, or a mask, as you might know them, and who I actually am, starts to increase, and people start to notice, like, this guy's fucked. And I don't think anybody knows. Even when I'm going fucking buying a chocolate bar at 7-Eleven, they know. Just looking at me, that guy's fucked. Because when your eyes are pinned out, you're like, oh, I'm super grateful right now. And you have like, and you're just like, you look like everyone immediately knows there's something severely wrong with you. So those are the obsessions.